Welcome to the Teaming Up podcast. For our latest episode, we talked with two national journalists about what PR professionals should know about their roles. This episode is extra special because we recorded it in front of a live audience of friends and clients at our new space in Scott's Addition. Now, over to Sean Ryan, our SVP of Media Relations, to start the conversation.
Good morning, everyone. Really appreciate you coming this morning. We're very lucky and fortunate to have with us today Adisa Hargett-Robinson and Jason Fuller. Adisa Hargett-Robinson is a reporter and media producer. Most recently, she was with ABC News as an associate booking producer and contributor to the Race and Culture Unit. She also has worked at WTOP and got her start in Military Times. Adisa is a graduate of California University of Pennsylvania and received her master's in broadcast journalism from American University. Welcome, Adisa.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Jason Fuller is a producer with NPR for All Things Considered and has been with NPR for almost 8 years. Before that, he gained experience at Virginia Public Radio and WTOP. He's a graduate of the University of New Mexico and got his master's degree in communication and journalism right here in Richmond at VCU.
It's exciting.
Awesome. Figured that would get a good applause. Well, Adisa, let's start with you. ABC News. Mm-hmm. That was a great experience for you for almost 5 years.
Yeah.
Can you tell our audience what you were doing at ABC News and the different things that you did kind of in your day in and day out role?
Yeah, so I was at ABC News for about 5 years. And I did several different things that did not always match the title of the job that I was necessarily given. But I would say primarily I was a booking producer. So I was probably, you guys are a lot in public relations, so you guys probably worked with a lot of booking producers. But for those who don't know, essentially, you know, when you have a guest on a television show or on radio, a lot of times it has to be booked. And so my job was booking these guests, finding these exciting stories, finding stories that would resonate with the audience. And it changed. You know, I worked with GMA3, I worked at ABC News Live, I worked at abcnews.com. And so all three of those have a very different voice. And so, you know, you kind of have to look at the story and say, you know, okay, is this a good story, first of all? And then would this work for GMA3? Okay, maybe not, but would it work for ABC News Live? And be able to find the story that works. So I did a lot of that. I also wrote a lot of stories. I was, as Sean mentioned, working with the Race and Culture Unit. So I covered a lot of really good stories, but a lot of really difficult and challenging stories as well. And I'd say I got some real firsthand experience. You know, a few years ago, there was a really tragic shooting in Hyde Park. And whenever there's a national whenever there's a big shooting or anything that happens along those lines, you know, everybody on the periphery is wondering, well, what happened? Who can we hear from? And so someone has to find those people. Someone has to knock on their door on the hardest day of their life and say, hey, you know, I know this is really difficult for you, and you have to connect with them. It's a lot of building connection and building relationships. It's building relationships in booking because you're booking, guests, but it's booking relationships. It's building relationship and connections because when you're speaking with someone whose mom was shot or who's lost a family member in the plane crash that happened this year in DC, you know, you have to connect with them, not just as, hey, I'm trying to get this story, but really be able to build that connection and connect with them on a deeper level because those stories need to be told. So I did a lot of those booking. I did a lot of writing. I did a lot of field producing. I did a great bit of things that I think that my title doesn't always capitalize or highlight. But I would say I really kind of did everything. I produced, I wrote stories, I booked stories. I was even on air for our podcast, Start Here. So yeah, I would say I did quite a bit of things at ABC News.
Jason, almost 8 years at NPR. You've worn various hats. What about the current hat?
Oh, goodness. Current hat. I'm a producer on All Things Considered. Yeah, it's been, can't believe 5 years have flown by. The number of hats, again, as Adisa was just speaking to, like, what is on, I guess your business card, whether or not if it's like coming in as an assistant producer or being a senior producer, the task that producers and editors and All Things Considered actually go out and achieve and tackle every day, like they can look very similar because everyone is pitching, everyone is booking, everyone is trying to find a new nuanced way into a conversation. And so I bring that up because that also means having that conversation in different modes, different platforms. So when I actually started on All Things Considered in 2020, again, so much was happening across the country. There was the pandemic. There was this racial reckoning that was happening across the country. And in so many ways, like to be entering a newsroom where it has so much gravitas and there are so many big personalities, and to be on a team that's like 30, 35 persons deep, like it can be very intimidating even to just speak up and speak with confidence when you're in a big boardroom and everyone's just looking down at you, trying to gauge whether or not if this pitch has legs to run across, different digital platforms. So I was honored to be a recipient of a National Murrow Award for breaking news. We did that. We did that in covering the death of Breonna Taylor, but doing it from a nuanced perspective of public responders, first responders, and especially during the pandemic where you had so many different things pulling the national media's attention in so many different directions. To speak to what Adisa was just speaking on, it was my task really, I think, during that story was trying to close the empathy gap. It's too easy for someone to be categorized and grouped with, okay, just another shooting, right? But actually detailing that, hey, Breonna Taylor actually, this was her shift, right? These are the persons whom she had a connection with. These are the persons who knew her as a expertise, spades player and a comedian, right? All of these things come out when you actually are able to, again, close that empathy gap. And it's no longer me speaking to you, from the standpoint of a reporter, but it's like, hey, I'm Jason, I'm from Detroit. I too have spent many summers playing spades, right? I too have had so many experiences where, yeah, I have like a few homeboys who pull me into trouble, but then are very funny, in terms of jokes as we're in the car, and bringing those aspects out, making sure the persons are fully seeing the multitudes that a person like Breonna Taylor had and what she possessed. It was something that we were just really big on, just trying to extract and just show the different ripple effects of, again, she held a position of, not just as a staffer, as a first responder, but she meant something to those people there as well, all of her colleagues. So always just trying to tap into that is one thing that I was really, really big on when I first got to All Things Considered. Still is. It's just the different modes of trying to tap into audiences. So I believe it was in 2023, we actually started doing, NPR started rolling out this visuals sort of shorts where we're telling stories in about 90 seconds. Everyone has a reel these days, but, we were being very experimental, and just the ability to, again, reach a different audience, reaching a younger audience, meeting them where they are, and actually having a creative approach to something like, hey, for instance, I remember there was this really good video we had on the increasing size of just concrete that was being allocated for parking across the country, and how there's actually a surplus in parking, but you wouldn't know it, if you're in one of these enormous cities where it feels like, you're driving from block to block to block trying to find that space. But we did this really creative approach where I was driving around in my car, lots of fast forward very fast and rewinding very fast. You're just trying to show someone what's the typical time that it takes to, for instance, park in Washington, D.C., and like how difficult that may be near Howard University's campus, for instance. So it's really just, I think that the name of our show, our flagship show, All Things Considered, it really does encompass the all aspects. It allows us to like continuously stay like, curious, but like it's kind of like this emboldenedness to not have any limits, not have any ceilings on what actually is quote unquote news. And when you actually don't have that ceiling, you're able to just, again, increase your net size.
Adisa, what was a normal day like for you working at ABC News? What did it look like on an average day?
So I would say prior to the election, we would have a lot of pitch meetings, probably like a few times a week. And I only say prior to the election just because I think that the last like 7 or 8 months have really kind of shifted a lot of ABC's coverage, and kind of a lot of other stories that we had been working on kind of fell by the wayside. So I'll just focus on that. But essentially, we would have a few pitch meetings a week, working with GMA3. The great thing about GMA3 was that the show was planned so far in advance, where it is June now, and we're already booking for September and August because we've booked the whole show for July. So essentially, it would be a lot of looking ahead at, okay, September is back to school month. What are some trending topics with families, with kids that would probably be a good story? So it was a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of looking at trends and seeing what's going on. It was a lot of looking at what's going on right now, because obviously things can always shift and you want to be prepared for that. But at a place like GMA3, where you have a lot of flexibility to work ahead, we had a lot of time to kind of look at what's going on. So we did a lot of that. And I would also say I went through a lot of emails, a lot of pitch emails.
How many? How many emails are in your inbox?
I had a folder. I had a good bit of folders. And I would try to get to all of them. And give a response one way or another. But, you need those stories because the conversations that you have with people, even if it doesn't work for that particular pitch, a lot of times the relationship and being able to connect can lead to a story down the line. So essentially, I was building connections. I was on the phone like half the day with people talking about various stories that we could work on right now, or stories that we could work on in the future, or sometimes just getting to know people and just kind of see what that looked like. I'd also say, as a booking producer, you work with a lot of guests. So whenever, we had someone coming into the office, I was responsible for making sure they made it to air on time, which doesn't necessarily on the surface seem like a big responsibility, but it is, because some people, can have big personalities. Some people, they're not familiar with being on television, with being in radio. And so, it can be a lot of hand holding and getting them ready and, making sure they feel comfortable. So a lot of working with our guests on air, and then a lot of also producing. Being in D.C., we have various lawmakers. I booked a good bit of lawmakers myself, and then even lawmakers that I did not book, I was field producing. So constantly going to the Hill to produce live shots. So I'd say it was kind of like a shift. There was a lot of moving parts and things would shift, and then there'd be breaking news. And then everything would be thrown out. We'd have someone booked for ABC News Live and we'd be all set to go. I booked them their car, they're ready to come. And then all of a sudden, something else pops off. And now you have to have the difficult conversation of saying, hey, we're not going to be able to actually have you on. And then find someone else frantically because, you still have to have live television. So there was a lot. There was a lot going on. When there was time, when I was able to, I would also try to pitch and write my own stories for abcnews.com. But, with all of the day-to-day responsibilities of getting segments on air. There wasn't as much time for that as I would have liked, but they were busy days. There were definitely busy long days for sure, but they're exciting because then, you come home and you watch world news at ABC, or you get on the website and you see the story there and you're watching ABC News Live. And I think when you watch television and you're not working in it, it looks so seamless. It's like, oh, this person just appears. This person is just here. Everyone just knows how to come together, and it just looks great. And for me, at home watching it, I can say, okay, they got on the Zoom link. We were able to get them on time. They made it to their makeup appointment. Okay, because there's so many hurdles and so many things that have to happen. And so, behind the scenes, like, I'm texting, like, okay, did you find your way? Like, are you having issues with the Zoom? Like, can I send you the Zoom link again? Like, there's so many things that go on. And so I'd say days were very busy, but being able to watch ABC News Live or read an article or watch GMA3 and see, hey, I booked that. I found that, it made it really all worthwhile. So yeah, they were busy days that were very different, especially when breaking news would come. But yeah, I very much enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Jason, same question. What's an average day look like? Probably not as much makeup worrying about if people get those appointments, but you do have some video. But what's your average day like?
Oh, my. So, yes, there's always, I feel like I owe so many persons apologies for the number of emails that I have not replied to. I have to get so much better at that, even if it's just more and more, just letting folks know, like, hey, this is covered.
Yeah.
This is what would be appetizing. I'm trying to go about being more intentional, because I think when people reach out, whether it's for business or whether it's, for a panel, I think reciprocating that is something that I'm trying to get more and more, grounded in as a dad, as a husband. So I think those aspects, spill over into the job. But I wanted to say that first. I owe so many people replies. All things considered is a beast because of both the workload, but sometimes when you have been, I guess, swimming in 10 feet water, your muscle gets stretched and it gets worked to the point where you can't see yourself growing, right? It's really hard. I don't think we spend enough time looking in the mirror. I know that may be, a taboo statement, maybe someone may think that's diving into or investing into conceitedness, but I think actually seeing yourself and seeing how we grow, it's really hard for us to see that. A tree doesn't know when it's growing. And so I say that because I've directed so many live segments. I've been the update producer. I've been line producing the show, which, again, these positions probably don't mean that much or aren't landing, but the line producer has the absolute last say on an audio piece that is going out there. They are looking through very meticulously at the intros that our hosts are getting ready to read. And if there's a conversation that maybe it takes up the entire A segment, which is 11 minutes, 29 seconds, you are just in this mode of both fact checking with your ears and your eyes, trying to make sure the audio is good to go. You're also communicating with the director who's in Studio 31, who's probably speaking to Mary Louise Kelly in her ear about, hey, there's a clip coming up right now. There's so much that is happening all at once. And I think I had to bring that up because our days sometimes can look completely different from one day to the next. You may be directing the show, but then you may be update producing, which may be a later shift, but it gives you that autonomy in terms of breaking news, especially given the amount of news that has been breaking both internationally, economic news, news regarding institutions of culture here across the country. It really just put me in the space of giving yourself like that autonomy. And it's something that's earned through trust. And I think that's something that also, it takes a bit of time to like fully understand that, hey, I'm being put in all these different places, which may be, you know, uncanny in terms of like how it's scheduled, but it's like the trust is there. All of that to say, getting up, pitching, we have a pitch meeting every day. And I think when you have so many phenomenal reporters, journalists in a room, like iron sharpens iron. And so every day, like getting a pitch out, having a guest already in mind, preferably already having pre-interviewed this guest in mind so that you're going to the pitch meeting with fruit that you can actually, vocalize, booking that person, and then comes the madness of this taped at 1:30. Okay, the interview ended at 2:15. Okay, this has to go on at 4:35. Okay, let's do it. And it's like every day. And I think this might be, you know, a little shout out, but we were like taping this segment with Gene Demby. He's the one of the co-hosts of Code Switch. And he came in, he did an interview, and he was like, bro, I'm so sorry. Because I had a few hiccups. And I'm like, we got this. He's like, bro, like this airs in like 90 minutes. Are you sure? I'm like, yeah. And then for him to like, I guess, look at the board and see that the piece was in like, you know, maybe much earlier than he had anticipated. He was like, are y'all robots? Like, what is going on down here? But I think it just speaks to just the muscle and just the reps, iron sharpening iron. And again, it's just being pushed and it's being pushed to be courageous every day. And I think especially as, you know, in PR, as we're like, you know, waiting the final decision with this rescission vote in the Senate, like our executive producer, Sammy Yinigan, our host, Mary Louise Kelly, Ari Shapiro, Wanda Summers, Elsa Chang, Scott Detrow, they're always pushing us to continue to be courageously like curious. And I think that is what continues to like motivate us every day. Yeah.
And for those pitch meetings, you guys are responsible for bringing the ideas in.
Oh, yeah.
So occasional PR pitches help with that, right?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
But that is part of it. You do have to come up with your ideas wherever you get them. You're challenged by your peers to come out and put forth ideas that might actually broadcast.
Absolutely.
What percentage is that? Is it like 100%, 90%? Like, or where are you getting your ideas?
I think both just by being naturally curious and like reading is just one thing that just like helps me. Like I can sometimes look like a weird person because I will walk around my house and like make a voice memo of just a story idea that I have. And then I'm like just piecing it together. And then maybe in 2 days, like that piece, that idea has legs that are strong enough for not just a conversation, but, you know, something that may have a digital presence as well. So there's always, I like to say reading and being out in the wild are kind of like the best ways to go about getting ideas, because as I was mentioning earlier, just about like concrete and parking spaces, like that was just from me being annoyed. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, so I feel like I always know how to drive, right? And so you just be driving around and you're just trying to find a parking spot. It's like, man, this is a bad park. Like, why does this street have so many street sweeping activities that are 2 to 3 times a week, right? So just experiencing life in the wild and then actually coming to a full head with yourself and actually trying to dissect it. That's one way I go about coming up with the story ideas. But then, of course, sometimes it is like a amazing, you know, alley-oop if you have a media relations, PR, expert associate that's reaching out to you and they have a tight like frame in terms of like what's appetizing, why this is like, why the timing is great, proximity in terms of like to other ideas that are sticky. That's typically my approach to like gathering ideas. Yeah.
Adisa, how do you decide what stories to pursue, and what kind of stories do you feel like break through?
Yeah, so I'll kind of piggyback off of Jason. I do agree that kind of being out and just kind of experiencing things really do kind of motivate you. Like I remember in 2020 when everyone was getting COVID vaccines and they were very highly advertised that they're free. I got a COVID vaccine and I got a bill. And I was like, whoa, it's supposed to be a free vaccine. Where is this bill coming from? And I ended up doing a story for abcnews.com on, okay, if the COVID vaccines are free, why are some people getting bills? And that story did very well on our website because other people were having the same issue. And so I definitely think that when you experience something, or if something that just like is an important cause in your mind, you know, that's definitely a great way to find a story because you're going to champion that. Even if, you know, editors or whoever is not a fan of it, you're going to champion it until it gets there. So I would say that's for sure. And then I'd also say kind of the relationships and some of the PR pitches, they definitely help because, you know, sometimes it's not necessarily like a set pitch that I know for sure will work for a story, but sometimes you're in a pitch meeting and they're saying, okay, well, we need someone, like I remember in February when a lot of the federal layoffs were happening, and we were looking for people who had been laid off to speak. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't necessarily know anyone right off, but I do know someone who is working with the National Education Association. I know that they are working with teachers, so maybe I can reach out to them and see what their feelings are on the Department of Education possibly being removed. And so that was able to work. And it wasn't necessarily like the pitch that they had sent me on, because the pitch that they had sent me was the National Education Association president. And we were able to use that person at one point, but sometimes it's not always that pitch, but it's the relationship and remembering, because I'll be honest, like I would get pitches from people and I had a completely separate folder that I would put them in where it was like something to just look at for later because it wasn't working right now, but it was like, okay, this might be something to look at later. And so, you know, as soon as we did need teachers, I reached back out to them and we were able to find teachers. And they worked with other people at other agencies who were dealing with people who had been laid off. And so I would say it's definitely a mix. And the thing that I've learned from being at ABC was I think at first I kind of struggled with this because I would pitch a lot of stories that I really liked and stories that I was very passionate about. And, sometimes you have to learn that just because you're passionate about it doesn't necessarily mean that your editor, who's 30 years older than you, is also as passionate about it. And so I started kind of shifting and saying, okay, this is something that I'm interested in. Let me put this on hold because, I want to see this story through, but I'm not going to bring it up in this meeting because I know that it's not going to go very well. And so I started, obviously I watched the show. Obviously I know what we air, but I started really, really looking at it and thinking like, what does do well for us? What do we like? And going more in line with those type of guests. And so I'd say like when I would receive pitches for GMA3 that would not work at all, that would be like a red flag. Okay, like this is going in the trash. Like I'm not even gonna like entertain this. Because it has to work with the audience. And so I'd say like the biggest like issue that I've seen with pitches that I see that don't make it even to like me wanting to have a conversation is this something that would work with our show? Because even if it's a great story and something that I might really like, or that, I'm not saying it's not a story, is it something that would work with this show, or something that would work with this group of people because, I worked at ABC News Live, I worked at GMA3, and they're both under the same network, but they're completely different shows. And so, being able to understand the difference between someone for ABC News Live and GMA3 and being able to have that in a pitch, I would say was very great. Because if someone sent me a pitch for a story that I knew would never make it on GMA3, but maybe wouldn't work for ABC News Live, I could look at that. But sometimes I would see things that I was like, well, this really is just not in line with any of the shows. And so that would be like not going to work. But if it was something that I felt like I could work with, our editors would be on board with, then for sure. I love coming to pitch meetings with several ideas and going through them, but only if I know that they make sense for the show. So yeah, that's what I'll say. If I knew that it was going to work well with the show.
We have about 5 minutes left before we turn over questions to anyone in the audience. So get those questions ready. A couple quick ones for you. Why journalism? Jason, why journalism? Why'd you get into doing what you do?
Wow. I think, firstly, I played football at Detroit Martin Luther King Junior Senior High School, where I believe more recently we are just winning state championship after state championship, right? And so I think initially, when I was on the team, there was like an element of like camaraderie where you're just speaking with folks whom you have potentially never met before. Maybe the first time you're running into them is like, as you're running, doing suicides like across the field. And so like that aspect of like tapping into other people and what they were experiencing, good or bad, was something that was always like interesting. It was always something that I kind of like, a little kind of salivated over a little bit back then, right? And then I think undergrad actually double majored mass communications and Africana studies. And then once I actually, started to, rise a little bit more and more on campus, like I actually got involved in like student government and being able to sit on like the finance committee, like allowed me to like see, just meeting different types of organizations, what their causes were and why they needed, $2,500 for this movie night that they're trying to host. So you're like, you're initially, you're filtering all of this, you're fielding so much. And it ultimately ended up with me, ended up working in AmeriCorps out in New Mexico. So it was like UNM Service Corps. And as my senior year was approaching, there was like a fellowship opportunity with KUNM. And it kind of like, I was like, this is interesting. Let me just apply and see what happens. And then I just started like mixing audio. And I was just listening sometimes to just really, really, really long, heavy conversations before I even knew how to like audio edit. And there was just something about how like the human voice was just something that just resonated like continuously. And I really feel that humans, we are like the greatest natural resource that we have, communication. And so, I said, what the heck, let's start applying for like grad school so that I can actually immerse myself into this unwieldy beast that is media. And I was blessed to have a lot of mentors who, whether it was through Toastmasters International or through my Greek-led organization, Alpha Phi Alpha, just so many different persons who were like pushing me, I guess, like in a different mode of life to just like striving for like greatness. And so like coupling that with just being open, following my ear, and leaning into stories where I felt like, yeah, maybe there was a lack of empathy in terms of like fully understanding a person's perspective and a person's predicament. And it just got me into, more and more just becoming a news hound and again, I can't believe it's almost been 10 years.
Yes.
Goodness. I think I just caught the bug. And once I caught the bug, it just became everybody's problem because I had always too many pitches, lots of pitches. And again, I feel like it wouldn't happen in any other place but All Things Considered, because it kind of gives producers like this emboldenedness to like be a general assignment reporter and go out, have ideas, bring those ideas, bring voices, bring so many different aspects, and also raising your hand when it's like, hey, this idea is amazing, but it needs to be a piece. It needs to come from one of our correspondents because of all of these different textured items that need to be incorporated into the story for it to fully breathe the way that it needs to.
Adisa, same question?
So I would say when I graduated from high school in 2012, I was super excited about the election. And I would go home every night and watch and like flip between the channels between like CNN and Fox and MSNBC. And I loved seeing the different perspectives and seeing the different television anchors and personalities. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to become a political analyst and I'm going to analyze politics. And that's what I really thought I wanted to do. And so I studied political science in school and I really enjoyed it. And I was convinced that like I was going to go into politics. And junior year, I got an internship at C-SPAN, working with the Washington Journal. And that was my first time really working in an actual newsroom, because previously I just worked on campaigns and with various lawmakers and very much more political. And I liked it, but I wasn't really sure that I loved it. And so when I went to C-SPAN and when I was working there and I was seeing all of the chaos and all of the excitement, I was like, okay, this is what I actually really love. And I decided like I didn't want to necessarily be like the analyst analyzing stories. I more so wanted to be the reporter telling stories. And I think that the more I got into it, because then I went to American for graduate school the next year, I really started to see the power in it. My grandparents live in a small town in North Carolina. And whenever my family would drive from Pennsylvania down there, and we would turn on the local news and they would have the national correspondents come on and give a news package and talk about it. I would listen to them speak about various things that were happening in the news. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I was at ABC earlier. I know the producer who cut the package. I know all that goes into getting all of the B-roll and all of the footage and how they had to rewrite it. And I saw like the power in what we're doing by knowing all of the behind the scenes and then like seeing it in a town miles away, and realizing like the reach that what that has. And I love the stories. I love being able to find unique things and bring them to a national audience. So I would say, my initial kind of interest in politics and political media kind of got me interested. And then my internship really opened my eyes to television and to media. And once I was in it, I just loved the power and the excitement that it has. And now I've been out of school almost 10 years. And it doesn't feel like it, but it's been almost 10 years. And I've really enjoyed it. And it's been a really exciting, fulfilling career.
Great. Well, Adisa and Jason are going to stick around for a little bit. If anybody has any questions and you want to talk to them in person, please feel free. We want to thank you again, Adisa Hargett-Robinson, Jason Fuller. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for listening to the Teaming Up podcast. Teaming Up is brought to you by the Hodges Partnership, a public relations agency that does PR differently. We bring clients thoughtful, strategic communications through earned, owned, and paid media. The Teaming Up podcast is a Happy Committee production. Episodes are released monthly, so subscribe on your favorite podcast service so you never miss an episode.